I would like to share some thoughts about stretching exercises today here with my little, what is seahorse? Seahorse. Stretching itself is a good idea. I mean, you can like increase the range of motion with stretches, you can release tension, you can make tissues glide better. You can raise the metabolic rate in tissues and so on. Good. Commonly it happens that I meet people who think like, oh yeah, actually when you stretch, it's like you pull on the muscle fibers. Let's just keep it to muscle now. You pull on the muscle fiber, and if you pull long enough and hard enough, often enough, the length will increase. That's a little bit like the idea of the elastic band. So if you pull on an elastic, it gets longer. But if you pull on an elastic and it gets longer, after a while, it loses its elasticity as well. So the question is, what is actually really happening when you stretch? And to understand that, we need to understand how the information about movement in our body is working, and that's working via our nervous system, via our brain and our nervous system. That's our information system. And we do have, let's call it a range of motion we're used to. So like if you're doing a certain sport, you have your range of motion. If you're sitting a lot at a desk in front of the computer, your hip flexors will be a little bit shortened. Maybe if you're working a lot on the laptop, your chest will be a little bit shortened. And you do not use the same length for very long periods of your day in the movement, which would be possible. So we think the muscle has shortened, which might to a certain extent be the case, but actually what happens very often is when you sedate a muscle, or when you sedate someone, then actually that range of motion is completely there, and the muscle fibers did not get longer all of a sudden. So why does that happen? Actually, in our body there are everywhere nerve cells, which it's like you have pain receptors and so on as well, but you have proprioceptors, which are sending information to your brain permanently what range of motion you are doing in certain body parts. So you have like a range of motion which is like where your brain says that's usually happening here. And there's a certain percentage over that range which is still okay. So let's say we're going for a walk and there's a little dip. Your brain is okay with that. But if there would be a deep hole, you would go in a protection contraction. Everyone knows that, I mean, the idea of the hole is very clear, I think, but everyone knows that for sure when you went downstairs and there's a step more than you thought of, you will have this contraction. And actually this type of contraction is a protection of the body, because the body did not expect that big range of motion, and says if the range of motion is bigger than expected, I need to protect it, because it could injure some tissues. And our brain is always wanting to protect us. So actually what does that mean? When you do want to do stretching exercises, for yourself you feel very well until where you can go. It's maybe a little uncomfortable, but it's okay. And then if you go a little further, it really starts to get uncomfortable. Your breathing like gets a little bit tighter, and you realize actually that's already a protection mechanism of the body, where you say, no, you went too far in the stretch. Our horses show that to us as well. They cannot tell us, excuse me, now it's too far, but they can actually communicate that the way they do, and they do. It's just a question if we read them. So you can see in their mimic when you pass that line of where you did too much, because they will show it already before they pull back. So everyone knows that and has seen people who come in the arena with their horses saddled, and they pick up the front leg and pull to like put the girth in a better place. And you see those horses like first bringing the leg forward and then pulling back. And that's actually when you do not listen to what your horse tells you, and when you do that like not really knowing what you're doing. Because each time you go over that range, your horse has to, or your brain, the horse's brain, has to go in this protection mechanism. And if you are in there, actually that is where often injuries happen, because that's when the fibers, you pull on them and they contract. So that's where sometimes you have ruptured muscle fibers and you have tendon problems, and it doesn't only count for muscle. Huh? So how can you do that in a good way? If you want to do stretching exercises, and you can do them in a very good way, it depends on never going over this protection mechanism of the body. So what you do actually is, excuse my horse, it's feeding time and we take too long here. So she says, please, let's go. I'm bored and I start to get stressed because I'm hungry. So we will release her in a short while. I will do it quick. So this range of motion where your body says, okay, this is what usually happens, a little bit more, it's like different percentages for different types of tissue. A little bit more is okay still, but if it gets too far out of range, you have this protection mechanism, protection contraction, we can say. So if you regularly reading your horse, do stretching exercise, and there's a lot of them, you can find them everywhere. There's some, there might be people around you as well who teach them. It's always good to ask someone who knows what they're doing. But actually the key to having a successful stretching exercise is to never go over that point. So to start reading your horse and looking at it, because before, already when you get in that range of, this is further than normal, than usually, they will make signs. And if you read those signs, you can say, okay, I'm in the zone. And if you are in that zone, just before the contraction, but a little bit out of range of the usual movement, and if you go there regularly, actually the usual range, which your brain has saved, will increase, because the brain says, no, this is happening very often, and it adapts. So actually after a while, your usual range of motion will be a little bit bigger. And then your buffer before the contraction will be a little bit further. And by this, you can really, sometimes quite fast, increase range of motion very well. And by that, loosen tensions and all the other positive things, increase metabolic rate and so on, which stretching can do. So hopefully I could give you some other ideas or some new ideas about stretching, or things you already knew and you can now pay attention to again. And yeah, if you like the video, feel free to share it. And I don't know where, but don't forget to subscribe to my channel.